Doug, there's seats for the planning commission members around. I'll introduce someone to you. You can stay so yeah, it's not exactly. Yeah, she sent it as a PDF, and it's. No, we had to update something.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special joint meeting of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission for West Goshen Township on Wednesday, January the 28th. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and the meeting may also be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. First item of business is public comment. So this is for folks who have a question or a comment about an item that is not on the agenda tonight. Is there anybody wishing to make a public comment? Mr. Abari, you have 2 minutes, sir, as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Abbas Berry. I'm a West Goshen taxpayer, and I'm a full-time corruption investigator. I investigate corruption in police department and municipalities and provide that information to the proper authorities. In the previous meetings, I have stated my father was a Superior Court judge in Iran, and he always said corruption always starts from the top. There was another expression he had. It always said, birds of a feather flock together. If you recall, there was Deb Ryan, Judge Ryan here last meeting, sworn a few of the members in. Deb Ryan was a DA, district attorney, and became a judge later. He was also accused of corruption. He was accused of racism by a black sheriff officer. County settled that case for $126,000. That's how the corruption starts. And also, if you recall, I always said in previous meetings that how the township managers knew, zoning officers knew, engineers knew, and also the head of the public works knew. Of course, the head of the public works hung himself for unknown reason to me. Corruption started way past when Mr. Halverson was in charge. It started with the theft of public money, basically. They call that squirreling, whatever that square means.
Please let Mr. White finish.
Let me finish first. And also, the corruption stays in the police department. Sergeant David Maurer was accused and convicted of stealing drugs and giving it to the hookers, excuse my expression, for sexual favors. They swept that under the rug. And also,
Mr. O'Leary, your time is up. 2 minutes are up, so please finish and sit down.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have one more, and then I'll be done with it. And also, the township was accused, the police department was accused of being fraudulent in their 501c, which they were paid $6,000 in fine. I was instrumental in that. Ask yourself, why those people that used to come before me, they all disappeared? Thank you.
Does anybody else have a public comment? Very good. Well, next on the agenda is item number 3, Board of Supervisors action item. I'm going to ask Chris to lead us through this.
Mr. Chairman, this is just a quick action item for the board to ratify the emergency declaration for the winter storm Fern that was this past weekend. Prior to the board taking any action, I want to make sure that we commend the work of our Public Works Department, the members of our Wastewater Department, and the member of our Codes Department who all assisted in plowing and winter maintenance operations. They did an outstanding job.
Second that.
So there would just need to be a motion and a second second and a vote from the board for the emergency declaration. And what this would do is if there is any funding that's made available, this would open the township up to be eligible to receive any funding to recoup costs for the storm.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to ratify the emergency declaration for the winter storm Fern to ensure that we are eligible for reimbursement of any costs that may be available from the state. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any comment or questions from the board? Any public comments or questions? Okay, we're ready to take a vote. All in favor say
Mr.
aye.
Chairman, I have a comment.
I'm sorry, sir, you're not a taxpayer or resident of West Goshen Township, as has been explained to you before. Please sit down. You're not.
All this to you.
We allow you to make a public comment. You are not allowed to comment on businesses of a township. You are not a resident or a
I'm a
taxpayer.
taxpayer. It is.
You have not provided any evidence that has satisfied us. You've done it every meeting. Please sit down. We are done with you. We have a motion second. Are there any public comments or questions from anyone? Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is item number 4, discussion regarding the comprehensive update, rewrite of the West Goshen Township zoning ordinance. Chris?
Members of the board, members of the Planning Commission, tonight we are here for a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. For several months, probably about 18 months at this point, we've been working with Gilmore and Associates to update the township zoning ordinance. I'm pleased to have Judith Stern-Goldstein from Gilmore Associates and Stacy Yoder from Gilmore Associates. They have been our lead consultants on this project, as well as our zoning officer Shelby Smith and our solicitor Kristen Camp. So over the course of that time, the board had approved a proposal from Gilmore to update the township zoning ordinance, which hadn't been done in quite some time. And we've been working through the Land Planning Committee to get that done. The Land Planning Committee is an ad hoc committee that consists of 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Hellman and Ms. Gagne, and 3 members of the Planning Commission, which are Mr. Stewart, Mr. Wildrick, and Mr. Wegenbauer. So we've been working on the various districts, the zoning map, and trying to make the zoning ordinance more user-friendly, I'll say. What I've found during my tenure as well as Ms. Smith's tenure is that the zoning ordinance has become a bit cumbersome and not as user-friendly as it could be. Additionally, the township is reaching the next stage in its life cycle, I'll say, where we're probably going to start focusing more on redevelopment than new development, and the current zoning ordinance doesn't fully address redevelopment. I mean, a good example of that was the work that was done with the West Goshen Shopping Center recently. And so we're bringing our codes up to what we would need to address the current situations of the time. So with that, Judy has prepared a very good presentation, and I will turn it over to her and her team to go over things. And then we'll add throughout the presentation, I'll open it up to some questions in case anybody has any questions or comments. Yes, please. You might have to turn it on. Just switch it on. And just let me know when you want me to switch slides.
Can everyone hear me? Oh, good. You can switch sides. Okay, so we started the project in April of '24. Chris gave the reasons why we're doing the project. And the purpose is to make the ordinance generally consistent with the 2019 comp plan and the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, which we fondly call the MPC. Also to address issues and concerns with regulations regarding redevelopment and adaptive reuse, specifically of shopping centers and office parks, basically your underutilized and/or vacant areas. Also to reorganize to create a more user-friendly document, consolidate districts. We went from 23 separate districts to 11 districts. And we also worked directly with the land planning committee that Chris already introduced and township staff. Next slide, please. I'm going to take you through each of the articles so that I'm giving you the overview a little more in-depth than the 10,000-foot view, but enough to give you the flavor for what's happened, and then everything is in the document itself, but this will be the crib sheet for you, if you will. In Article 2, it's regarding word usage and definitions. We went through and deleted several defined terms which are no longer referenced in the ordinance, and the way we determined that is simple. For each defined term that was in your ordinance, we did a word search in the draft new ordinance, and when it didn't appear, it was a term that no longer needed to be defined. So some were deleted, others were revised and added. So the list that you see, the extensive list, were ones that were either revised to bring up to current standards or added, addressing new terms that are used in the ordinance. And it's extensive. Everything from accessory dwelling unit through wetlands, and that was a minor change to the definition of wetlands to bring it up to current definitions, and everything in between. So let's go next slide, please. In Article 3, this is a new article that was created, and it's a use regulations. So there's a new organization to the zoning ordinance, and this was part of the whole make it user-friendly. There's a whole chapter that's nothing but use regulations, and each use has a category. For instance, A is the agricultural uses, and A1 through 4 are all different types of agricultural uses. B are the residential uses. B1 is single-family detached. C is religious, educational, recreational, or institutional as a group. D are office. E is retail and consumer services. F is common carriers, public utilities, public service uses. G would be industrial, and H are accessory. So let's take B1, the single-family detached. That designation is carried through the ordinance, so it's in the use regulations. Each district, when they list which uses are permitted, wherever a B1 is permitted, it's listed B1, single-family detached. Also in the parking regulations, that same code, B1, is referenced in the parking. So once you know what your use is, it's easy to go through and find it anywhere. And there's also a chart at the end of the ordinance that has where all the uses are listed, all the zoning districts, and then where each use is permitted by right, by conditional use or special exception or not permitted. So it's all tied to the use regulations and the terms. Some new uses were added, and some uses were removed that were no longer appropriate. Next slide, please. Revisions to Articles 4 through 14. Each of these are the district regulations. Each district lists their own permitted uses. In your current ordinance, each district listed, or the first district listed A, B, C, and D, like this use, that use, like single family detached, something else. And then the next district said, everything in that district plus this. And then the next one said, everything in the first district plus this and this. And that was a model that was done at the time and was used throughout Chester County and many parts of Montgomery County, but it led to confusion and it didn't have all of the terms defined and all of the uses were created as separate uses with their own regulations. There were some supplemental uses in one section. It was hard to know where to go unless you're using that ordinance specifically all the time. And over time, as new uses were created or new districts were created, there were Band-Aid amendments that then were sort of standalone and didn't fit into the structure. So that even though the original structure was very well written, I should say, it's antiquated based on the way it needs to be used today and the way developers need to be able to see what's permitted on their property. We find that when the regulations are more clear and easily viewed and understood, that we get better results with what people do with their property. People tend to follow the rules when they know what the rules are. It's when they don't understand what the rules are or can't find the rules and spend a lot of money on what they think might happen is when you get that point of contention. So we're all about making it more user-friendly. Each district then has its own regulations. It lists all the uses permitted by right, by conditional use or special exception, tied to the use code. Each district also has its own area and dimensional requirements. So the minimum required front, side, and rear yards, minimum lot area, things like that. And refers back to the use regulations for additional specific things, such as some uses might require a buffer yard, some uses might require a greater separation because of the intensity of that use. And that goes through each of the uses. Then go ahead, Chris.
I just want to piggyback on that. So one of the things that we did in sort of looking at consolidating the different zoning districts was we actually did a drive through the entire township, the land planning committee, to take a look at kind of the makeup of the township, the different zoning districts, especially along the major corridors, to kind of see where commonalities lie, since we were blending a lot of existing zoning districts into one. And I thought that was a very helpful exercise.
And just for clarity, how many districts are there now in the current zone?
23.
23, and
No.
now we're consolidating that down to 11?
11.
Does that include all of our overlays that we discovered?
Yes.
Yes. That was the other user issue, was there were a lot of overlays over things.
Did you create a document which allows us to transition from existing to proposed new? Because, for example, you have C4 is called multi-use corridor, and you see, is that the same as a C4? In other words, is there a way to connect the old and the new without too much confusion? Do we have to run everything over?
Some of this sheet actually does that. For instance, I'm trying to think how many bullets down. When you look at R4 became R3, and 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet down. R3, R3A, R3C became R2. Existing R2 and RGC district became proposed R1 district. So that is is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, something like that, but are the uses the same? Or did you, like, sitting around with all the uses?
The uses now are defined as uses as opposed to just descriptive words.
Okay, but are they not the same?
Are you asking, are they the same in each district now? Did they stay the same in which district they're allowed in?
In other words, for example, C4, the use allowed C4, is it the same as MUC? As your new MUC?
No, because C2, C3, C4, and C5 became MUC, mixed-use corridor. So it's not any one use that's all in the MUC. It's a combination of many of those uses are in the MUC. We no longer have the distinction of whether or not the restaurant has a drive-through or what type of restaurant it is, or like that. This is more of an all-inclusive district, so it's no longer just C4.
So Dr. Moyer, are you asking, is there a way to like redline the existing ordinance to show you the changes? I don't think there is. I mean, I think this is such an overhaul that process would be a nightmare and it wouldn't make any sense. So you really have to just look at, I think this is a really good help to understand the conversion, but you have to just look at this new ordinance as a new ordinance.
And Stacy put this together, so this is the executive level conversion sheet. So you can understand that. Doug, were you trying to say something too? I thought you leaned in to say something.
Well, yeah, I would suggest that you finish your presentation before we start getting into the details of what changed. You know, that will help, you know, once you get through your whole presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Ready for the next slide?
Yes, please.
There you go.
This is the proposed zoning map, but this one that's in the slide is not actually the current one. There was a mix-up in the GIS data, and the township corrected that today, so we'll come back to the zoning map later.
Yep, and I have it ready to display.
Thank you.
And that was my mix-up.
Revisions to Article 15. Environmental performance standards is that article, and this was not that extensive. We added provisions for wetlands and lakes and ponds and water courses, and we moved the nuisance performance standards to this article. They had been part of standard conditions or something, and this moved into the environmental performance standards. Next slide, please. Revisions to Article 16. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
16. I'm like having momentary loss there. Sorry. This is the supplemental regulations, and the majority of supplemental regulations were specific to uses, as I described before. So, however, since the proposed ordinance has a separate use regulations article, many of the supplemental regulations have been deleted and were appropriate added into the use regulations. In addition, the article contained many design standards which were more appropriate to the subdivision land development ordinance, so they were deleted from here, and some, such as the landscape regulations, have already been in transition to be moved. Revisions were made to the buffer and screening provisions and requirements, and the remaining sections were not amended, and they include visibility at intersections, projections into yards, exceptions on height limitations, house trailers, vehicle restrictions in residential districts, unified development plans, sale of consumer fireworks, microwave antennas, drive-through lanes, and minimum building lot requirements. They're all sections that were in your supplemental regulations that have not changed. We did not do major surgery to them. Again, most of this chapter were the supplemental regulations specific to individual uses, which are now in the use regulations where appropriate. Next, please, Chris. And then Article 17 is regarding off-street parking and loading. We created a separate article for parking provisions, and as I said before, each use has a code, so that code goes through. For instance, D1 is office. So when you see D1, you go to the use regulations, you look, see what your uses are, you go to the chart at the end, see what districts it's permitted in, go to those districts for your area and dimensional regulations, and then you come to the parking chapter, and that will tell you what your parking regs are, all by that same code. We also revised the off-street parking space requirements to reflect all uses, so every use has a parking requirement, and if it doesn't, it says not applicable. And also revised to no longer regulate based on number of employees. This is big when we get into code enforcement. So you have a building, let's use easy numbers, 1,000 square feet. and in the district in which its use is retail. But rather than have to count employees, now we know it's 1,000 square feet. I'm gonna just pick a random one space per 200 feet. I think that might be what it is. So that's 5 parking spaces. It's 5 parking spaces whether they have 5 employees or 1 employee, and Shelby doesn't have to go count employees, and we don't have to have a new land development because now they have 7 employees instead, and they're doing well, and so their parking requirements changed because they have different employees. I'm exaggerating the example, but many ordinances that were originally written in the 60s and 70s, and even into the early 80s, were based on number of employees plus so many square feet equals this parking space, or number of vehicles stored on a lot. Hard to enforce, hard to deal with when you have a land development coming in, especially when we're trying to encourage adaptive reuse and redevelopment. If you have a 1,000 square foot building, and just because they would have 1 more employee or 1 less employee, it changes their parking requirement, it really makes it difficult for people to come into existing buildings and use them. And I think that if I understand it correctly, the township wants to encourage adaptive reuse and revitalization of existing underutilized vacant buildings and not have them sit there. So this was to ease that in and make the rule clear so that people can get new tenants in if somebody leaves. Sometimes tenants are in a smaller building or smaller space, need to go to a bigger one. They should be able to switch from one to one without coming in for new parking regulations.
That's a quick question. So if you have a small business, say like a home office, home medical, or dental office, and there's no chance you're going to get any sort of employees, they must have parking for 5?
No. A home occupation is something different, and we'll get into that on accessory uses. This would be a separate office building, which has a separate parking regulation. Home occupations are regulated separately.
Okay, but even if we're not a home occupation, it's a actual commercial building, they have to have parking for 5 at least?
No, my example is based on 1,000 square feet at 1 space per 200 square feet. That was very specific. I was just giving an example. It would need to meet whatever the parking regulation is for their use.
I'm going to again suggest that she finish her presentation before we get into the questions.
Judy, were you ready for me to go to signs?
Yes, please. Thank you. Next article is signs. And we created a separate article for sign provisions, so all the sign regulations are now in that one article. And we updated the temporary sign regulations to be content neutral in accordance with current rules and regulations and Supreme Court decisions. We did not change the regulations for your regular signs, it was just the temporary to bring them up to date. Next slide, please. The next section deals with floodplain regulations, there was no change. Airport zoning regulations, that article, no change also. Non-conforming uses, premises, structures, and lots, no change yet. There might be changes coming. Shelby expressed some desire to look into that more. Administration, the changes were made only to make it consistent with the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. The zoning hearing board, there were some minor changes again for consistency with the MPC. Jurisdiction of Board of Supervisors, again, minor changes for consistency with the NPC. Next slide, please. Then we get into the adoption process. We're here tonight for the joint meeting, with the Planning Commission and the Board. Next, there will be anticipated revisions to the ordinance. We've had meetings today with 2 members of the Land Planning Committee and staff and your township solicitor. Our intent is to continue, have 1 more meeting with township solicitor to continue going over the issues that might arise. Come back to the Land Planning Committee. At that point, the Land Planning Committee would look at all of the revisions that have been in to date. They would then have 30 days to get any of their suggested revisions into Chris. This all evolved today, so it's on the slide. 30 days to get their revisions into Chris, and then we would have a meeting to go over everything with the Land Planning Committee, talk about what would be changed, get a recommendation from them for us to make those changes and to go on to the board. Assuming that recommendation is a positive recommendation to go to the board, there would be a board meeting to authorize advertisement of the draft ordinance for adoption. At that point, the draft would be distributed to the Regional Planning Commission, which is Chester County Planning Commission, and the Township Planning Commission for review and comment in accordance with the NPC guidelines. West Goshen Township Planning Commission would have a public meeting, as all of your meetings are public, for the Planning Commission to review and make recommendations on the draft ordinance and map. That recommendation, in addition to the comments from Chester County Planning Commission, then will be brought to the board, who will have a hearing, public hearing, that will be held to consider adoption of the draft zoning ordinance and zoning map. And it's our understanding that once the board authorizes advertisement of the zoning ordinance, it would be made available on the township website for review and comment by the public.
Yep.
Did I sum all that up based on our discussion today, Chris?
I think you hit on everything.
Okay, and then next slide, I think that's it.
So here's how, because we have a large number of people here, here's how, and to a recommendarian, a policy-making body, here's how I want to run questions and answers. I'm going to turn it over to the board first to see if there are any questions from the board, and then any questions from the Planning Commission, and then we can open it up to the audience for any public comment that they may have. Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay. And I just want to, before we go into questions and answers, I want to thank the Land Planning Committee. They've done a lot of great work through the last 18, 20 months and to get us to this point. It's been a pretty big undertaking. So with that, I'll see if the board has any questions for Judy or Stacy. I mean, just if you have any general question, if you want to go by section or if you want to go by just any general questions that you may have.
Well, let me start with a general question. Just the path going forward at this point. Obviously, we're having a meeting tonight between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, as well as the general public. And what's going to happen now after this? Is there going to be a time for people to respond to the draft, make comments, and so on and so forth? Can we talk about the path going forward?
So that's, I believe that's what Judy just laid out. So the path going forward would be as she stated. So once it's authorized for advertisement, then that version would be reviewed.
How long is that advertisement period for? 30 days?
I believe it's 30 days.
30-day period from tonight.
No.
No,
It's
so
40, no,
It's
not
45.
from tonight.
you're
You're not
talking about
authorized.
sending it to county planning? and all
No,
that? The advertisement's only a 2-week advertisement for a hearing.
Right,
Okay, but there's a 30-day review period for
By
the
the
county.
county planning.
right.
It's 45 days.
It's
and the full ordinance,
45
yeah.
days if it's the full ordinance, but that's not happening tonight because no one is asking the board to authorize advertising tonight. So until such time as any revisions are brought forth, the request revisions are brought forth and revisions are made, and the Land Planning Committee would make their recommendation. Until all that happens and it comes to the board for authorizing advertising, it won't be made public yet, because you haven't had the chance to decide if that's what you would like to make public. We don't get to decide that for you, and we respect that.
Okay, that makes sense to me, because obviously we've had 2 members of the board on the Land Planning Committee. We've had a couple of members of the Planning Commission, so they're much more familiar with the journey that you've been on to create this and the interactions that you've had over the 20 months. For the other 3 board members and the other members of the Planning Committee, we've had this work in progress document for 10 days or something.
Right.
There's a lot of information in here. And so, for example, back to Doug's point, when you consolidated the districts into one, it looks like, I'm assuming, almost all the uses were just allowed in the new consolidated district. So as I looked at it, I started to think to myself, do I really want to see some of those uses in some of these particular new districts? So I've got comments, which may or may not be how the other board members see it.
Right.
So we need a process to work through what we believe is an acceptable use for each of the new districts. I don't know how that works yet, I've just thought of it tonight, so we need to have that process work. If all the board are going to weigh in on those, it's going to have to be in a public meeting, but it will be still a work in progress, if you see what I mean. It won't be a finished product ready to go to this formal authorized for adoption process.
What we had discussed was over the next 30 days, allow the board members and the planning commission members individually, not as a group, send me any comments. We will kind of collect all of those comments, filter them, because there are bound to be some that are repetitive, and bring those to the land planning committee to review, and then ultimately make a recommendation to the board. Which is a similar, we're going through a similar planning process with the Park Recreation and Open Space Plan, and it's kind of following a similar line to what we're doing with that planning document.
Yeah.
Okay, so my comments and questions should just go to you after this meeting tonight?
Certainly.
Consolidated, we need to discuss them here, or just?
What we can do then is I'll send around an email, and then you guys can respond individually to me, and I'll filter out, and Shelby and Judy and I will filter sort of everything down.
Okay.
But if they're detailed comments, if you've got some
general
questions,
ones.
I'd like to hear them, because I've got a couple, maybe there's an answer to them, and it would benefit all of us to hear that now, so
I
to
have
speak.
a few, I mean, I can just go over a few.
So that's why you kick it off and see how it works.
Some
Peter,
simple
your mic
ones.
on.
Okay. Like one of them was on page 37 for the bed and breakfast. One of the questions is, I had two of them, why does the owner have to live there? And why can't a family member who works there be considered an employee?
That was one of the things I brought up today in our meeting.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to answer that tonight or, just listen.
Maybe go through questions, and then give folks time to look up if there's a clear answer or not, and then we'll.
Okay.
What page is that on?
25.
Yes.
That wasn't 37.
I was gonna say, I know, I'm looking at 36.
I'm sorry. It was page 37. I was looking at the one at the comment above it.
It's
Where it
not on
was,
page
yeah.
37.
Yes, page 37.
No,
Should be
it's
like
on my
the end.
37.
34?
Well, in my comments, when I put them electronically, it's the page number, so. I'm
Page
assuming-
34.
34.
Oh, so it's off, so this is
No, it's
off.
up by 3.
Wow.
We can see the table.
Yeah, I raised that.
Here I'm
question.
relying on the electronics.
Well, you have to factor in the table of
That's what
contents.
Jenny said.
Yeah, that's in your current ordinance, and we did not change those regulations.
Okay, is that something we could look at?
Well, you can make a comment, and your
Okay.
suggestion be Chris, and then we'll see if other board members have the same one, and then something needs to be resolved or whatever else. Well, it needs to be resolved at that time.
Okay.
I also questioned that myself,
Uh-huh.
but then when we talked it through with our meeting today, the goal is that you really want it to remain as a residential dwelling, and the bed and breakfast is sort of the accessory part to it, so that's to keep it from like flipping over to more of like a hotel motel type thing. It's supposed to really be like the families running this, and as a accessory component to be the bed and breakfast part. That's what that's intended for, but that absolutely could be something. My point of it was, how do we enforce that? Right,
Yeah.
we're not there at night, but I mean, that's the intention of why that's written that way. But I think that is the type of comment that you're like, hey, does the board really want to see this?
Yeah, and enforce it.
And we're fine with whatever the board wants on something like that. There's no specific planning reason other than when it was written, I'm assuming it was to keep it in the residential character.
Yeah, which you still could do.
I think something like that, to that level of detail, would be something good to sort of put in an email and allow the land planning committee to sort of filter through and make a recommendation to the board.
Yeah, okay. Another one I said, on that same topic, it indicates any inn regardless of more than 4 rooms should have public sewer. I would think, does that really matter how many rooms you have as to whether you need public sewer?
Yeah.
That does, that gets into how much effluent needs to be treated, and it can change the entire nature of what the need is.
So shouldn't you say any B&B should have it then, regardless of the number of rooms, especially when you have the usage being high?
I mean, I see your logic.
It just seems like it's very
And again,
specific.
and that's, again, the existing
Yeah.
ordinance, we did not change bed and breakfast use. It was
Yeah.
one that was existing.
You know, another one, they can't stay more than 7 days.
That's common in bed and breakfast.
Okay, that just seems pretty restrictive. I don't understand it.
That's actually pretty standard.
Okay. And then well, I have 41s on 3 pages off. My computer is 3 pages off. I just said take out any age restriction in this entire section because people can be disabled and need care at any age. That section is really relative to care, not necessarily age. Just because you're a certain age doesn't mean you need care.
Well, the independent living facility, is that the one you're talking about, the age restricted?
Yeah, number 12
Number
deals
12?
with, number 12 deals with independent living facilities.
That whole section.
But that's
Talks
meant to
about
be, that's
age.
meant to be that you can have it be a over 55 community. It's written that way so that it qualifies for the exemption for fair housing, that you can discriminate and say you have to be 55 and over. There's certain regulations under the federal law in order to say that you can restrict it, that one resident of each dwelling unit has to be 55 or older. That's why that's written that way, to make sure you qualify for that exemption.
Right, and if
It's a
you,
specific use that's meant to be service time.
Some facilities are 55, some are 65, so it varies. So by putting an age in there,
The age is based on the federal law.
no.
that's the minimum age for the federal law.
Okay. So what if there's a 65?
That's okay, you're.
That's fine.
You're over
That's over
55.
55. That's fine.
Okay. This one, that same section, I put any time restrictions of only a year, because why does it matter?
A year for what?
In that same section, a year for that,
Independent living?
yeah, a year. It's in that section, there's a time restriction. A year. See if I can find it.
I don't see anything in there.
I have to search for it.
I mean, there are time restrictions on certain approvals, but those are in our existing ordinance where they're only valid for a certain period of time until, like a variance approval from the zoning hearing board is only valid for a year from the day of the issuance unless you get a building permit. So you have to continue on with the process within a year of being granted the relief.
Okay. The other thing is just a comment regarding a section earlier regarding service stations. I just thought the definition should, or the wording in there should be storage and sale. Right now it's just sale. I have it on 25,
So 22.
22. Right now it just says the sale of, but most service stations have the storage of either above ground or and/or below ground tanks. Unless you're assuming that because they're selling it, they have tanks. It'd just be cleaner just to put it in there.
If we did for the facility for the sale or storage of, that would be a separate tank farm, which would not be a service station. I would be concerned with that. I understand that in order to sell it, they have to store it on property, but they're storing for their sales use. They're not storing it for tank farm use, like just having nothing but storing fuel, which would be a more intense use and not what you would want to have.
Well, the reason why I say that is because there are specific regulations regarding underground storage tanks at a service station facility that need to be complied to. So-
And they will be.
And that's covered by the state.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, but there's state regulations that preempt our municipal zoning.
Right, that everything has to be contained in the concrete, yeah.
I don't know. Not having it in there, if we had an issue with it, we would be able to address it.
State would.
Yeah, those facilities are state regulated, they preempt our zoning, so there's really no action that we can take.
Okay. Did you want to go on, Charles? I have.
Yeah, well, let's just go around the rest of the board. So Nate, do you have any specific comments you want to make?
Not at this time.
Okay. Actually, you good? Okay, so I have a couple. So going back to the idea of consolidating the districts into a simplification into one. You said you believe they carried forward all the uses from those 3 or 4 that went into one. So the new district has all
In general, I believe, I don't know if every specific use was in there, but in general, especially when we looked at the mixed use, where a lot of the commercial were combined, it was to create opportunities for adaptive reuse and revitalization and give more flexibility so that we didn't have 3 or 4 commercial uses along a corridor that all had different exclusions.
Yeah.
So it was to give more flexibility and also to include the residential component for the adaptive reuse for some of the underutilized areas.
Yes, that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. I have a question, John, that might help you, because I also wanted to ask this. So did the land planning committee, when you're working on this, did you look at, because you said you did a drive of the township, did you look at, what you're calling the new district, and then examine what uses were permitted where that used to be, what the district used to be, and then sort of analyze whether those uses were still appropriate, and then add to them?
We did that at the beginning.
Okay.
We did the tour at the very beginning so that we would have common language and common knowledge of the areas, and that
Yes.
visit informed us through the rest of it. So when we did go through the use regulations, which we went early on about what uses in which district, we did that use by use. And then it got further defined as the use regulations were written, it was further defined. And a couple of questions even came up today that items that were discussed last year, early last year, needed more refinement, and some uses, even today, were suggested, maybe that should be conditional use instead of permitted based on the district.
Yeah, so my specific concern on that was the neighborhood commercial district, which I think it's C1 today that became NC. So
Yes.
we've had the most issue at the board level with new proposals in this C1 neighborhood commercial district, because new business, new activity adjacent to residential areas creates people's concerns about what amount of issues they may have with whatever's proposed. So two that come to mind were the large Wawa that's being constructed at the Parkway Shopping Center, which is in this C1NC district. We've been back and forth with this. Going back to when this neighborhood commercial district was first created, it was way before we had big Wawas around with 20 fuel pumps, etc. It was much more smaller service station concept. So the board actually took out from that district fueling service stations. So you can have a retail service, but you can't have fueling in our current C1. We did it after Wawa, so they were grandfathered in. Some people say unfortunately, but it should not be in our NC district as a fueling service station.
So then the E17 fueling service station in the current draft has it by conditional use in the NC, which was probably discussed right before the time that you were actually making the final decisions on the Wawa.
It was around this. It was in the same time period.
So you're suggesting that should be an N
It
for not
would be
permitted?
consistent with what we have agreed and approved at this board, yeah. But in general, I think the board and the planning commission members should carefully look at NC and what proposed uses are in there, because there are a couple of other uses which I don't feel are appropriate. We actually have one in front of the board the other week related to car wash and where these districts are located and the traffic problems we have. So there's it would certainly behoove us all to take a look at that and consider whether those are appropriate uses to be adjacent to neighborhoods. And I'm not saying there aren't other ones, that's the one I focused on for the purposes of tonight. But any other comments I'll have, I'll make sure I pass them on to Chris.
Sean, neighborhood commercial is something that I will be addressing, from the planning commission's, at least my opinion about it. So you've hit something.
It's near and dear to you.
It's perfect.
Okay. A couple other questions for myself. Have we taken a look at the issue of short-term rentals and how they addressed in this? Kristen's got a lot of experience of it with the Westchester Borough. I don't know what in terms of this draft, how you've managed it.
With respect to this draft, there were several meetings at which short-term rentals were discussed. And again, with respect to the draft, it was the Land Planning Committee's decision and recommendation after those several meetings to not regulate them through the zoning, but to regulate them through a rental registration process and a standalone ordinance, which you already have for rental.
That's correct. We have a standalone ordinance for rental registrations, and the discussion we had was, they're all rentals, so kind of treat them all the same.
And Sean, my two top comments today were data centers and short-term rentals.
Okay.
So I think that you need to address it in zoning in some manner.
So Chris and Shelby, do we need to do more work with Kristen's experience around short-term
We
rentals?
talked about it.
We
We had an idea, and
Okay.
we circulated that, yeah.
And
And it's a
we-
simple fix.
It's a very simple fix, and
Okay.
Kristen will give us a little paragraph to put in into the special regulations section.
And just so everyone's aware, and as it relates to data centers that Kristen mentioned, when we originally started this process, we were going to regulate them through some of the catch-all regulations. However, as we were talking today, given how they've evolved and what's going on, Kristen is working with other clients of hers related to regulations for data centers. She's going to send the draft of what she's working on to Judy, and we'll incorporate that into the final document. Because we believe that that's something, in our discussion, we came to the conclusion that that has to be something that we have to address on the outset.
If there's several Chester County municipalities that are dealing with them right now, it's the active application. So it's something that's truly coming, whether you want it or not to the size and scale that you're seeing in Lehigh Townships or Lehigh County, but
And Monroe.
you are seeing them. East Whiteland has a project, East Whiteland, West Whiteland, West Vincent, I think, has a project. There's a couple floating out there. So I think it does need to be regulated differently than a warehouse use or distribution center or even just an office use. So.
And since Kristen's actively working on this for other clients, we thought let's see what's in the pipeline and see if we can make it work for us.
Another use is self-storage. How has that been addressed in this new zoning ordinance?
We do have storage.
We've had a proliferation of self-storage over the last 5 years that seem to be dotted throughout the township, and another very productive use in my mind of our space. But
Yeah. Mini warehouse and self-storage is categorized as proposed use G3.
G3.
And we do have use regulations for that. And it's permitted only in the ELI and the I districts.
Okay. So I don't know if you know the answer to this, Chris, but some of the ones we've currently got either built or being built, would they no longer be valid in the case of this new zoning?
No, they would be, because if you look at the BLI district, that's in like the light purple district, and that's where a lot of them have been constructed.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can bring up the previous zoning map so you can kind of see the difference.
Too much detail tonight. Okay. And then one other question for myself is, a lot of people would like to be able to do accessory dwelling units. It's something that's become more of a trend, more popular. Have we done anything to address the ease at which accessory dwelling units could be approved?
Yes, we've created a use that is accessory dwelling units. We've had accessory use that would be accessory dwelling units. And give me 1 second as I turn the page without getting the paper cut again.
So I have them if you're right, if you want me to.
Do you have that out there?
Yep. So it is under use H3, and it would be permitted by conditional use in the R1, R2, and R3 zoning districts.
We don't have that today, right? So that's a...
We do not. Currently, the current zoning...
And PUC.
Oh, and PUC, excuse me, and the PUC district.
Yeah.
Shelby, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently the zoning ordinance only discusses in-law suites, and then they become deed restricted for
Correct.
family members.
Right.
So that is the current use. So this would expand upon that.
Okay.
And we do have regulations and we have diagrams that show what they would be if they're part of the existing dwelling unit, if they're in addition to an existing dwelling unit, or if they're in an accessory structure or building on the property. So there's all different criteria. And as Chris said, it would no longer be just an in-law suite or a family accessory dwelling unit. It would be a true accessory dwelling unit as currently proposed.
Okay.
One thing that I forgot to mention from the onset, one thing that we did at the beginning of this whole process was the land planning committee met and we outlined, even before we brought Judy and Stacy on board, we outlined all the goals for this update. We took out a whiteboard and we outlined all the goals, and housing and accessory dwelling units was at the top of what the committee wanted to address with this process.
Okay.
And also, just on that accessory dwelling units, in the definition section, and there's some sketches, some diagrams of what they would be, which goes beyond what we considered in the past, which I think is great. And this is something that we discussed early on, in fact, as part of the scope of the work for the contractor that we would, consultant that we would hire to do this rewrite, to incorporate sketches like this within, the new zoning ordinance update. Just because, the pictures, it's 1,000 words right there. You can understand, what you're talking about just by a picture. So I encourage you to continue that. I asked the zoning officer also to come up with any suggestions that she may have in those sections of the code which are somewhat difficult for folks to understand with the sketch. or a table or whatever would be appropriate. This way, the whole zoning ordinance would become much more user-friendly and understandable. With the idea being that clarity would lend people to tend to follow the rules better if they understand what the rules are. So I really strongly suggest that we do that and continue that even more so with we end up with the final product.
I think that's a great point. I think for me, the toughest thing sometimes to understand is how you define setbacks, front yard, rear yard, side yards, and sketches often help on that. Building setback lines, right-of-way line, that kind of thing. But those pictures are worth 1,000 words in those regulations. So that's a good point, John.
So one last question for myself. So again, it's about the consolidation of districts, and it's just a generic thought. Is there potential that we're going to have some unintended consequences by creating either nonconformities or issues related to people looking for variances and a whole bunch of nonconformities in the new district because of the consolidation? Or is that really not really a problem?
You probably have a lot of nonconformities already because many of your housing stock was built before even the current zoning ordinance was in place. So with respect to that, there will always be potential for nonconformities. And with a change in zoning districts, yes, there will be some more. But there are regulations in your ordinance that deal with nonconformities. People have the right to continue to use the property as it was used already. They have the right to continue any nonconformities with respect to area and dimensional requirements. And if they expand, there are provisions for how they can expand. The current nonconformity regulations have not been updated. When we spoke before, it was understood, so I understand that the township was comfortable with those. In talking to your zoning officer today, there is a need for some clarification. There were just too many scenarios, if this, if that. It needed to be clarified a little, so we are going to work on cleaning up the nonconformities in the regulations with regard to them. But there will be nonconformities, there always have been.
So just to push it a little further, so let's say today there's a nonconformity in terms of a lot size, and in that same zoning district, someone has a bigger property that they want to subdivide into 2 properties, and they can say, well, I'm going to go to the zoning hearing board and ask for a variance on this, and look, there's already 10% of the properties have the same size of lots that I'm going to create, so that's a lever for them. If, on the other hand, we create this consolidation, and now 30% of the lots would be non-conforming to a new standard, are we kind of making it easier for an argument that says, well, we can subdivide it because now it's obvious that there's so many lots that have, certain setbacks, whatever else, that we're okay, right?
That would not meet the standard for a variance. They need to prove a hardship, and there's specific hardships that are permitted.
I understand. I'm just saying how arguments get made by people.
I can't say how your zoning hearing board would treat it, but I can say how the regulations are for
Yeah,
variances.
I understand.
I can tell you we did have an application go before the zoning hearing board that's similar to that, and last night they denied that application.
I want to go beyond what Sean said, because I think, and I'm going to use a specific example, like hospitals. Like, we all know there's a hospital in West Goshen, right? So the provisions on hospitals on page 37, when you pick these regulations, did you look at the Chester County Hospital to see if that lot met these? Because I do have a concern that if you're creating new regulations for existing uses we already have, well, why didn't we look at what we have to see if that makes sense for what we're putting in as the regs? Because now, if we say, okay, the hospital has to have minimum lot area of 10 acres, and I know Chester County Hospital probably does, but if they didn't, it is a nightmare to deal with nonconformities. It's just, Shelby asked me to help rewrite that. That language was written by Ron Nagel in probably 95. I mean, that section of your code is in so many Chester County municipalities, and it's cut and pasted because it's such a hard doctrine to deal with. There's a million cases out there from the appellate courts dealing with nonconformities, and they're all over the place. So it's a very difficult topic and condition to address, whether it's a nonconforming lot, building or structure or use. And again, it's very confusing. So one of my biggest concerns was on some of these
not new uses, but uses that we know exist, and there's now these new regulations, how much emphasis or discussion was there in making sure those regulations are meet what we really have in West Goshen? And I know you can't do it for a shopping center. We have a lot of different shopping centers. That's hard to do, but I think there should be some analysis of that so that we're not having all these uses that we know off the bat the existing use isn't going to meet these sections.
We did do analysis. I can't tell you that there was a detailed analysis of every use, but we did do analysis, and we also used many of these supplemental regulations that were in the supplemental regulations article dealing with specific uses were then put into the use regulations, and where feasible at all, they went in verbatim. So I believe some of the hospital regulations, if not all, were moved from the supplemental regulations into the use regulations. And we did look at that. As the committee, we did talk about a lot of the area dimensional requirements and whether or not they were appropriate. And some of the residential ones were massaged quite a bit because some of the existing districts had regulations where most of the homes did not comply at all. And we had discussions about that. In some cases, it was a compromise between over-regulation and non-regulation, but I think it was done thoughtfully.
Yeah.
None of these were done arbitrarily.
And
So
I
there
wasn't
was,
suggesting they were.
No, but-
Yeah, I didn't understand the process.
yeah, but I can tell you that not everyone had a full analysis. Some of them were, yes, that's what we have already, let's keep it, or yes, that sounds reasonable. But the bigger and more important ones, like a hospital, there was analysis.
Yeah.
Does that make
I was just
sense?
gonna say, I mean, the process itself is so difficult. You know, you have to look at this as just a brand new ordinance in a really large picture. And so I think it's very unlikely that we'll be left with something completely perfect with no non-conforming uses. But I feel like, as Judy said, we really did look at the what ifs, and Shelby was really helpful. We had many discussions about what could this potentially lead to. But I feel comfortable with kind of where we landed. Was that hospital use in our original code, like in our original ordinance?
It was in the use regulations.
Yeah, and that, you said that today on a lot of, you said, oh, we carried that over. I'm like, okay, well, that's good then, because likely then.
But did we with the hospital? Yeah, that's something to look at. I don't know.
Okay, so I think that was it from the board comments. Doug, do you want to walk through all the planning commission members and see comments? We'll come back. Give you more planning comments. Doug, go ahead. We'll get the planning commission comments.
Okay, I want to bring up two issues. Although I've had many comments, and today earlier today we went through a lot of my comments, minor comments mostly. But Sean, you mentioned the neighborhood commercial. There are several parcels that are in the neighborhood commercial district in the township. They're small, often surrounded by residential uses. And I think of neighborhood commercial as something of low intensity, not high intensity. Fueling stations certainly shouldn't be in there. The car wash, I know, is an issue for the board to consider. And so my suggestion is that the neighborhood commercial be a low-intensity commercial type of use, especially given the fact that there are pockets within residential areas. So that is my recommendation and something that we discussed earlier today in our meeting. Other people on the planning commission can express their views about that. The second issue I want to bring up is actually to revisit something that the Land Planning Committee had considered, which relates to the hospital and some vacant parcels that are near the hospital. Planning Commission should be looking to the future of what's happening within the township, particularly with vacant parcels. Medical use related to the hospital, or maybe not related to the hospital, but medical use, I think should be encouraged, given the industry and how it's growing like crazy. Today I happen to be at the Fern Hill facility across Phoenixville Pike. I couldn't find a parking space. It's so intense because such a demand for those uses. My feeling is that the large parcel at Goshen Road and Phoenixville Pike, as well as across Goshen Road, there's a smaller strip, should be part of a medical services district that would include the hospital. I think it's our obligation to recognize that the medical uses are not going away. They're not lessening, and that there's going to be constant growth. Now, I do recognize that medical offices can be permitted in other parts of the township, but I think what we should do is focus on those parcels I mentioned and have a vision for what the future should be. We should be guiding it, and therefore I would hate to see it watered down with other uses, residential and non-medical offices. I think it's an opportunity lost if we don't have an exclusive medical services designation for those parcels.
So just for a point of reference, the parcels Mr. Stewart is referring to are these here. And then this is the Chester County Hospital property. So these three, and then these.
Thank you, Chris.
R2 is what's in there today. That's a single property.
It is a single. I forget the acreage. It's across from Phoenixville Pike, and it's a. I believe there might be a house on it.
32 acres.
It's 32 acres,
It's zoned as wetlands.
and it's currently zoned residential.
It's a historical sprinkler.
And then this is the existing Fern Hill Medical Complex. And then this is Chester County Hospital. So Chester County Hospital is about 22 acres, I want to say, and I don't know these off the top of my head.
Close to 18. Well, that was
No,
the
there's-
one
oh wait, because
parcel.
the Turks had health. And it's the
Right,
other
the one parcel was 18, the
Yeah,
other.
this is 18, this is about 4.
Yeah.
So these are the remaining.
So Doug, just to push you on your opinion here, so you're saying that R2 parcel, you would like it to be zoned as whatever, whichever one of these districts it would fall in, it would no longer be an R2, it would be one of the commercially.
Okay.
Yes.
And actually, I believe the discussion from Doug with the Land Planning Committee was to create a medical services district. And we did write a draft district for that with draft regulations, and it was presented to the Land Planning Committee, but that would be a separate district, if I'm not mistaken. That's what you're asking for, right?
Yeah, and I have to apologize, I was not able to attend that Land Planning Committee meeting when it was discussed, so I wasn't able to advocate for my position, although I understand Judy did her best because she knew of my
Explain your
concerns.
position.
We did sort of diverge in our views on this particular issue, Doug. I did not agree with that approach. I don't know if this is the place to kind of sort of hash this out, but this is something that did come up. As Sean said and pointed out, that parcel is residential as it stands right now. And I think that creating a medical use district is just too confining. I don't really see the need to just make it for medical. I think it's actually taking away from the property and what it could be used for, and especially the person who owns that parcel, the residential parcel, I don't know.
I think it's also wetlands a little bit, there's a creek running through there.
Yeah.
And we had discussions too, that there's enough other property with the BLI that would justify medical being there.
So
So Chris, can you, so this goes back to my original comment about how we get differing views or opinions or suggestions from everybody who, planning commission members of the board. Right now, the process was to send them to you, and then you would work through it with the land planning committee to kind of see, is there a lot of support for this idea or whatever?
So I think
else,
what we
right?
can do is take it back to the land planning committee kind of based on the comments that are received, but I'll note kind of what Corey was saying. The BLI district does permit hospitals, medical offices, ambulatory care centers, either by right or by conditional use. So those are permitted. The residential is obviously restricted to residential uses.
Didn't we talk about making that the parcel BLI?
Well,
We did.
that came up, but ultimately the decision was to keep it residential.
That was discussed, though, that was that long meeting that went back and forth. And I believe that the conclusion of that meeting was to leave a large parcel R2 and to keep the BLI where the BLI was and not to touch the other R3, which is the apartment complex.
And if I'm remembering correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the reason with keeping it R2 was because of the proximity to other residential properties. Was that correct?
That was a big part of the discussion, yes, and unknown about what could go in there and the impact on the residential adjacent and across the street.
But what we can do is filter through comments received by the members and take it back to the land planning committee before final
So Doug, you
presentation.
continue to advocate for that with your comments into Chris, and now you've raised it as an issue, we obviously all the board can weigh in as well as to what they think it's a good idea or not, so. Keep going, what else have you got?
Okay, are there other comments from the planning commission?
I have just two very general ones. We talked quite a bit about, in fact, one of the goals was opportunities for affordable housing. And maybe you could just, we talked about ADUs already, but summarize changes that would address that and everything across the board.
So, accessory dwelling units are sort of the poster child of affordable housing in this ordinance because they do create opportunities for people to rent dwelling units, accessory dwelling units on their property. They're also a way for people to age in place, whether they're renting out an accessory dwelling unit or they move into the accessory dwelling unit and they use the main property as rental. It's a nice way for people to age in place and also provide affordable housing. In addition, in the mixed-use Carter District, we are adding residential and as a component of that, so it would be multifamily residential, which we being the township and planners, cannot control the price point, but when you provide more opportunities for residential in smaller dwelling units in conjunction with non-residential uses that would complement it and enable people to get to goods and services and places of employment without needing cars. It creates opportunity for people to live more affordably and hopefully to afford the rents in those dwelling units. So it's the whole creating opportunity for adaptive reuse and revitalization of the corridor, putting higher density options for residential in where goods and services and places of employment and medical services are permitted and can exist. It creates more opportunities for people to have non-traditional modes of transportation such as walking, biking, to and from work, public transportation, not relying on cars, which are at an expense. So it's not just one piece, it's the whole thing knitted together, but that corridor is the predominant area in addition to the accessory dwelling units that will be permitted in several districts throughout the township.
Okay, and if I could also add to that, we also created a special district for the mobile home park. And this way it will be preserved as that. So that's affordable housing in our township, it sure is affordable housing, and we don't want to lose it. I just wanted that sort of summarized in one place. The other thing is,
It's a manufactured home community. That's where?
Where is that mobile home?
Off of Westchester Pike.
Near the forge.
Yeah, it's owned by another group, and it's still a mobile home park.
But what uses did we remove from that?
Pretty much everything except for those
Except
that
for the
are,
manufactured home
And
community.
like forestry?
yeah, anything that we're required by law to have is by right use.
Right,
Yeah,
so
right.
no impact home-based businesses, accessory use is permitted. The manufactured home community is permitted, and forestry and agriculture are permitted.
Do we keep like municipal uses in there, or do we take all those out?
don't remember.
You took all the other residential uses.
I know we did that.
Is public utility required in all districts as well? Is that another?
I know, full use.
No, but if a public utility has a certificate of public convenience, they can bypass your zone.
So we changed, so I might have asked this in the land, we changed the zoning for that parcel, and this guy owns it, and we bought it, allowed certain uses. Does it affect his property value, and now it's like, cool?
Your rights are only vested, President, correct me if I'm wrong, your rights are only vested if you submit, under the existing zoning, if you submit like a land development plan that's applicable to that zoning at the time.
So because he hasn't done that, it doesn't matter.
And currently, the zoning wouldn't allow for any other residential use besides a mobile home park.
Not even like originally.
Another quick question, again, very general, is that, and I think you did a great job in simplifying it and making it accessible and well organized, and the graphics are great. Do you know if it's actually smaller in terms of pages or words than the original?
It has to be.
I don't know, we didn't compare that, but it has to be.
It's about the same.
That wasn't that specific goal, but I just wondered how it worked out.
I think it is. And I did get the, do you want to know the list of what's in the manufactured home park?
We have a
Okay.
concept.
It's,
Nothing major.
it's about what I said,
Okay.
except recreational and municipal use and emergency services are in. We added them, I think, to every district.
Corey, all right,
Corey, do you have any comments? Planning commission members?
Fern Hill, I'd like to address Fern Hill. That was built by a guy named John Chickera.
Yeah.
It was sold as condominiums. And then the hospital now owns that. They bought out all their, so yeah, they need more space, definitely. Because I go in there a lot. You gotta walk a mile, I feel like I'm in New York.
Very thanks.
In the zoning rewrite here, were you careful to not downzone any particular parcel or having a situation where you created a taking? For example, on Falcon Lane, there's 3 properties, 401, 403, 405, C4, RC4. They're on, they're in the docket press. There was a little bit of oddball 72, and it was done. So you kept those properties in the multi-use corridor district.
That's actually upzoning them.
Okay, yeah.
It gives them more flexibility and options of which they can use on their
Okay,
land.
so that's good. So you didn't do anything where you created like an inadvertent taking in any place, right?
We didn't look at every single parcel separately. There are some
Because I
new
would-
regulations that might create some existing nonconformities, but no rights per se were
Okay.
taken, and certainly not intentionally, and we did look at the areas in general.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and then also, in the driving ordinance, we had originally created the 3 zoning districts because of the housing types, and you put it on to one district. Could that be a problem? Because, for example, over in Gershon is the estate homes, and then over across is a little bit north of that, the smaller singles. And so you have areas that are zoned single-family detached and areas that are zoned multifamily, but now they're all together. So my opinion is you should just have the separate zoning districts for the housing types, because you could have a situation where, I don't think it'll happen, but it could, for somewhere on Gershon could want to tear down their house, new, but it could happen, and want to put some sort of multi-family unit on.
If they meet the area and dimensional requirements for a multi-family unit, they could. And that was,
But originally, we didn't want that. We've done
Judy and Stacy in the zoning code rewrite, sorry, I thought I could talk loud enough, are not, they're not amending the Greystone.
Oh, he's talking Greystone?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
they're
sorry,
not,
Greystone did not
they're
change.
not amending it, so whatever the most recent amendment was that we recently
Because it's-
adopted, is moving forward.
Where is that? I think you did. I
Greystone is
think
the R3, you put it all into a district.
R3.
R3B Flexible Design Conservation District, starting on page 83.
Oh, so it's still there, Doug, because there's still the District Zone A, District Zone B,
Yeah.
District, so that's still the same.
We took
Yeah,
we took Greystone from Kristen
Yeah,
and put it
from
in
you.
here.
Yeah, it's just on the.
It wasn't me, it was-
That's all.
Yeah, it's the R3B district.
Right, it's just all one color, so I thought they'd be combined. So-
Oh, no, I didn't hear you say Greystone, I'm sorry, I didn't go on and I
All
didn't
right.
catch that.
It's okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Does anyone else from the planning commission have any questions, comments? Yes, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the zoning map, the township has become built out. There's not a lot of square footage left. So are we considering areas where we can go more vertical with property? I mean, for example, something like golf club apartments is a lower apartment complex. The owner decides they want to put in 6-story, more dense housing. Is that going to be part of this zoning change? I mean,
But it goes back to this whole question, what kind of vision do we have for West Goshen? And Doug gave one good example that he believes is a good idea. I mean, this is the kind of comment we want to receive in now for us all to digest. I mean, I haven't thought of it at all. I mean, it's the kind of opportunity to give this the kind of in-depth thinking around ideas like that as to whether we're amenable to those kind of things or, you know, status quo for now. So I think your suggestion is a good idea in terms of that's the process we want, so feed them in and let's see what the general view is on those ideas.
So,
And where you might suggest it would be located.
Yeah.
no. I mean, the MPC seems to be fairly catch-all zoning district.
well, the one thing I'll say is, I believe that like, you gave the example of golf club apartments, so I'll just use them. They're in the MUC district, I believe, the new multi-use corridor district, which would have a maximum building height of 40 feet based on here. So if they can do it, then they would be limited by the height regulations. If they can't meet it, then they could ask the board in the future to amend the zoning ordinance, or they could seek a variance or things of that nature.
In addition, in the.
I think that got turned off.
In the BLI district, which permits the lifestyle apartments, that's where I believe it's the Luxor one is.
Correct.
The maximum building height there is 50 feet, and the BLI then is another district that could accommodate something like the lifestyle apartments.
This is what Westchester just went through with hotels downtown, having to increase the heights, and they got some givebacks because they moved the upper floors back from the rows. But just thinking down the road here, that we're going to need vertical housing here, and I'm not sure 50 feet is going to be enough.
One of the things we talked about, and I don't remember if it made it into the final draft, was kind of like a mixed use for like redevelopment of like the shopping centers in the future if possible, like with retail on the bottom and residential on top. Did that make it into the final version?
It did. There's a use created called mixed use, and then
Okay.
there's also the mixed use corridor district that permits mixed use in like, building by building, but the mixed use permits it in one building.
Yeah, so a good example of that is like on Market Street where they have like a lot, like some of those restaurants and then apartments above it, or also Eastside Flats in Malvern is a good example of that. So that's kind of the vision that we were thinking of. And that also kind of goes back to the talk about affordable housing, like allowing some more adaptive reuse of these commercial spaces.
And Stacy just corrected me, in the BLI district, the maximum height is 50 feet, but the lifestyle apartment use itself, you can go to 60 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the use regulations themselves go a little higher.
And to be frank, like in front of the Planning Commission and the board, any sort of height amendment or height regulation, I would personally want the input of the fire company, because the one thing we have to make sure of is that any sort of height that they can get up to that, because I believe that a lot of the height regulations that came into zoning ordinances previously was because of the height limitations on a ladder truck. Is that correct, Steve? Yeah. So.
Yeah, then they can probably get up to the Luxor, which is 50 feet.
Yep.
Right, so I mean, I don't remember us looking at height regulations. For
We
the-
didn't really.
We really didn't, but it's a really good suggestion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should feed your specific comments in, Steve, especially if you've got a couple of areas that you think would be amenable to that kind of.
Yeah, if you have ideas, you can send them to me as part of your comments.
I have a suggestion. So some of the comments, like I know Tino is like really into the nitty gritty. Like I think some of those comments are ones that like pass them on. They seem logical, but the ones that are like policy issues, maybe you got Chris when you guys are sifting through all these, you take a page that's like policy issues to discuss, and like that's the ones that you really come back to get everybody's input on. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That could certainly be possible.
That would help me a lot.
Yeah.
Because I'm not making your policy decisions. I can give you the pros and cons of every option, but I need the direction from you for policy decisions.
The land planning committee make the policy recommendation, and then it comes to the board says yay or nay to that recommendation. That's its own dialogue. But I think you're gonna have to frame all the comments that you're getting into the ones that are like easy ones, okay, no big deal, that makes sense, policy conversation.
So Tina, do you have policy questions, or are they ones you can just feed Judy and Stacy to get specific answers on why it is the way it is?
I think there may be comments at this point.
So with that,
I'll just submit them and separate now.
anyone else from the planning commission have any questions or comments? Yes, Kevin?
Regarding the procedure, when we have questions, we submit them to you.
Yep.
If we're doing that individually, do we get to see other suggestions from everybody else that we can maybe comment on, that we can?
In order to prevent any kind of appearance of deliberation over email, we would not have any kind of deliberation. So send them to me and we'll filter them through the land planning committee. That would be the appropriate process.
I mean, you could print everybody's and then pass them out, but I think he's right, you don't wanna hit everybody reply all,
Yeah,
then you're gonna get
right.
to this deliberation. But it might not be a bad idea to compile
Oh, yeah.
the packet of.
I can certainly do that.
Wait, you
That's a
don't
good idea.
electronically write on the document, there's a comment section, and it'll pop up, and choose who it is.
That
That would be deliberation.
That would be deliberating over email, and we don't want to do that.
As much sense as it makes.
The laws don't always make sense.
Yes.
So Chris, before we go to the public comments, can we just see, Kristen, have you got any, you've had a meeting today, you're very familiar with our zoning, have you got any issues or concerns that have not been expressed today that you would share?
No, a lot of it was that I didn't understand how they went about it, so understanding that, and that so much was, like, for specific uses were carried over, and that there was a lot of dialogue and things. So I think we made good progress today, and some, changes will be made. We're about halfway done. I think we have one more meeting next week, but no, I feel a lot more comfortable about it.
Chris, you want to?
All right, so with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions or comments from the public. So if you could raise your hand and state your name, that would be great. And Shelby has a microphone if you wouldn't mind coming up, and that would be fantastic. So does anyone from the public have any questions or comments?
Yeah.
All right, Steve?
Stephen Lyons, just a question about how...
Could you come up and use the microphone, please?
Stephen Lyons, just a question about how the historic overlay ordinance will work in this thinking. And second question is, what is Township's vision for historic preservation of our resources?
You want to take that, Judy?
I can take the overlay thing. During the land planning committee meetings, it was brought to our attention that the township has been working on a historic preservation overlay. When I asked if that would be done soon, this was over a year ago, I was told it's not yet ready. If it had been done already, I would have incorporated it into this. At this point, the historic sections dealing with historic uses and historic preservation are as they are today, anticipating that the township is working on the overlay. We did not want to overstep and create recommendations that could potentially contradict all the hard work that's being done right now.
So we do.
So just so I'm clear, when we talk about overlay, are we talking about our ordinance? Because what we're doing is identifying historic properties and creating an ordinance to be able to document them and to try to prevent demolition by neglect. We don't have a zoning overlay from a historic perspective, is my understanding.
I was using the terminology that was given to me.
So that is correct. There is the ordinance that is being discussed with the Historic Commission on February 26th and has been discussed by the board, does not create an overlay district. It creates provisions for documentation prior to any kind of demolition and provisions for demolition by neglect.
But it does identify and classify not classify anymore, but what are the historic resources you're trying to protect?
Correct.
Right, which is separate from zoning.
No, it's
Well,
in
it's in the
zoning.
zoning.
Chapter in zoning.
It will be a chapter in zoning.
Yeah.
It'll be a chapter in the zoning ordinance, and we can ultimately incorporate that into the final version.
And one of my comments to Judy today was, because she has a definition of historic structure, and I just said we should check what that definition is versus what's in this proposed ordinance, because I don't want to have it conflicting.
So we're not actual properties in the zoning ordinance?
You're going to identify what are historic resources,
Okay.
an inventory of historic resources.
An inventory.
So we already have attachment, like a Schedule A. It won't probably be written directly in the zoning code, it'll probably be attached. The same way that the signs are, and the sign specification table is, it'll probably be an attachment similar to that.
There were roughly, I want to say, 80 to 85 properties, and those were the notifications that I sent out at the end of December to the property owners to invite them to the meeting at the end of February.
So Stephen had a second part to his question, which was, what is the position of the township relative to this, right? So we've been on a journey here for many years, trying to just get this ordinance in place, and I believe that is where the majority of the board have, that's where we are today in terms of wanting to implement that in its final form. And we get to that point, we have this public meeting at the end of February, a joint meeting of the board with the Historic Commission. We'll see what kind of comments and feedback we get from the owners of these properties, and we'll take it one step at a time. So that's where we are.
Does anybody else from the public have any questions or comments? Yes. Want to state your name and use the microphone, please?
Hi, Stephanie Finley. I think Mr. Walsh and Mr. Stewart mentioned the commercial use in residential areas. I think I got the terminology correct. And I think Mr. Stewart was asking with the topic of low intensity versus high intensity.
In neighborhood commercial district, I was suggesting that they should be not high-intensity uses permitted.
Right. So I didn't know if the rezoning, or I'm probably not using the right words, but if this had anything to do with changing intensity of uses for that particular commercial use in residential?
I think you were the lady who was here during the discussion the board had about the car wash, right?
Right.
So this is exactly the point I was making earlier about my own issues with the fueling stations. But when I look at it, I see that car wash is actually shown as conditional use for neighborhood commercial. So we need to provide our individual feedback as to whether we feel that's acceptable, and that was the suggestion I was making. Okay. So that issue was tabled, if you like, at that previous meeting. We wanted to wait until we see where this landed. I have my own personal view on that, and as we develop this further, we'll see if that survives or not.
Terrific. He had just brought up some new vocabulary for me, the low intensity, high intensity. I was like, oh, I don't know what that means.
Well, it's not just you, I need to know too. I'm like, low intensity, what is that? Yeah.
So just a basic definition, low intensity would be like something that doesn't generate a whole lot of traffic, so to speak.
No, I know what it means.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I would think low
what
intensity.
uses compared to what
A dry cleaner.
Dry cleaner, bank, things like that I would see as low intensity.
Would you be able to look at like the traffic studies from those kinds of?
Not necessarily, but they would be, I think kind of in what was being stated earlier, I think kind of like the vision for neighborhood commercial was those type of, the banks, the dry cleaners, the personal service sort of things.
I know, I want to be careful because I mean, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like, I know that they pitched a car wash as a, and I'm not advocating, they pitched a car wash as a relatively lower impact use than, for example, retail. So I guess my question is if, and I think we should look at this really carefully, because I agree, that if we're gonna kind of limit the uses, then I want to understand what the uses actually produce as far as traffic.
I think when we get it sounds like this is going to be a comment that we get from individuals related to the uses. So I think then the land planning committee, once we get those comments, can kind of digest some of those individual uses to make a recommendation to the board and the planning commission, and we can kind of come up with some examples for those things.
Can I ask a favor as you do your homework and do your comments? If there are any uses currently proposed in the NC district, or just uses in general, that you feel do not belong in that district, please mention them in your notes, or anything that you feel strongly should be in that district. We need to hear that feedback, because low intensity and high intensity are going to have different, or low impact, high impact, we're going to have different connotations to each of you. So show us your examples with your words and thoughts.
Yeah.
Judy, I have a question. Do you know if so for Ashley's point of like, how are we going to define what it is? Intensity can be more than just traffic. It can be noise, it can be hours of operation, lighting, things like that. But do you know if the ITE manuals are publicly available for if they wanted to look like, oh, well, what would your typical retail store generate as far as traffic versus what would a car wash? Because I would never say a car wash is low intensity ever. I don't know who's, you know what I mean? But I would be curious what the data says. Do you know if that's available?
ITE is available, and it's now in the advent of AI. When you Google things, it has access to ITE because AI has read it. So you.
It's a manual that traffic engineers use to determine how much traffic. It's based on real uses in the world. That it stands for the Institute of Traffic Engineers, and it's a manual that they put together as a guide to determine traffic, how much traffic is generated by various uses. So to me, that would be a good something to look at.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the only time I've seen somebody argue that car wash is less intense is just on the number of employees, especially with the self-serve ones. So you have to be careful. You have to ask the questions about what they mean when they say low intensity, because traffic, noise, fumes, cars stacking on the street are all different types of intensity that you should be aware of.
and if we can, and I'm sure we can find it on, actually that might be something good, a copy of that manual to circulate to the planning commission and the board so that they can kind of look through the uses and things like that.
Is it like user-friendly?
ITE, it's user-friendly when searchable.
Yeah.
It's not user-friendly in a PDF that's been Xeroxed. It's also not user-friendly in the book that they all used to have, so.
Well, I was gonna say, if we can't find it like through a Google search and attach it, I'll contact Carroll Engineering or McCormick Taylor, I'm sure they would.
McCormick would probably be.
I'm sure Andy has a copy of it.
Yeah, or I could, steal it from our traffic people.
Okay.
I was just making a comment that I'm not a big fan of the ITE or whatever it's called, because I don't think it really reflects the real world of West Goshen in 2026 in terms of some of the numbers that are in there. But I think you have to use your common sense, your own observations and things. So just going back to NC, NC in there we have conditional use as a medical marijuana facility. I would not want that in NC. I'm speaking for myself personally, it's a comment I'll be feeding in. Nor would I want a low intensity use like self-storage. It's just not something I would like to see next to neighbors. So these are my personal comments, and I'll be providing them in the land planning committee. We'll work through them and we'll update what's in the draft that we have right now.
I just want to say a word of caution though, that the Pennsylvania Medical Marijuana Act dictates where you have to allow them. So right now, you have to treat a medical marijuana dispensary the way you treat a retail store. So if you allow a retail store in that district, you have to allow a medical marijuana dispensary. Same thing with medical marijuana grower processor. You have to treat it like you treat a manufacturing use. So wherever you allow a manufacturing use, you also have to allow that use. That's based on state law.
Thank you, Kristen, for setting this straight.
You saved me from having that discussion.
People don't want to hear that, but it's
Yeah.
the state legislature, not this legislature.
So just to clarify that, the step going forward, now we got a 30-day period, which we're going to submit comments from the board and the planning commission to Chris and get them to Judy. And then the land planning committee will discuss that, come up with a revised grant. At what point then would the general public have an opportunity to make input?
I think early on we talked about that once the board kind of authorizes it for advertisement, then we'll put it out to the public to review. But I was thinking for tonight's purposes, it might not be a bad idea, since this might be a little bit of a longer process, to at least kind of put up Judy's presentation from this evening to provide just like a 40,000 foot overview of things, kind of it's 13 slides, and it'll give a nice overview.
Yeah, put that on the website.
Yep. I think we can do that.
So when is your land planning committee then going to be in March?
Probably, yes.
The March meeting. Thought coming back to the board in April?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a grant deadline that you're trying to meet?
No.
No.
We're not doing, so this project, we're not doing under any kind of a grant.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, Shelby had a question for someone.
Jill Marin, this question's for Judy, I think. You said something about a minor modification to the terms at the beginning of the presentation. And wetlands, I think, was modified a little. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, it was the definition of wetlands to match current federal laws. I can read you the new definition. Bear with me.
So while you're looking it up, is our definition weaker and not as clear as to what wetlands delineation was? What is the federal standard of?
Your definition had parameters for, I believe, an engineer to make an interpretation on something also.
I think wasn't there a Supreme Court case that was dealing with what is a wetland?
There's been
I feel
several.
like there was a case that led to legislation to change it.
So wetlands, areas of undrained, saturated soils supporting wetland vegetation where the water table is at or near the surface or where shallow water covers the site due to permanent or seasonal inundation of surface water or groundwater or other areas meeting the wetlands criteria set by the Department of Environmental Resources or the United States Army Corps of Engineers.
And that's where we took out, it was like a full discussion of the engineers.
Right, and all the different types of studies you could do to do that. This just took it right down to the definition. That's the Department of Environmental Resources.
Different.
Not Department of Environmental Protection.
Yeah, environmental protection.
Should we not listen at all?
It is DEP. Yes, that's a typo. Thank you. Showing my age on DER. I don't know if that just came out of there.
Does anyone else from the public have any questions or comments? All right, Doug, you have a comment? No. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes.
Could you add page numbers to the table of contents and we talk about?
Yeah, Judy has the word draft. I don't have the word draft, so we didn't need her to.
What was that?
Well, in the beginning, with all the articles, there's no case numbers.
Oh, the way we put ordinances together until it's finally done, we don't put the page numbers on because it's a work in progress. It's a draft.
You will.
Yeah, when it's posted on the E-code, it's going to go digitally to E-code, so you're not going to physically look at paper copies, and they don't paginate it. They create their own sections. So you're not going to see, when we used to have ordinances that were all hard copies, we would have the ordinance section at the top of each page and a page number at the bottom. We don't do that now because that's extra formatting that screws it up when you hand it digitally or send it digitally to E-code. We do everything so that it can be put on E-code. If that makes sense.
You got a question?
Yes.
Your name, please?
It's Lisa Angelou, and there was a statement that data centers are going to be incorporated into the final product. We'll have a chance to give our opinion on that.
Yep. So just to give a 30,000 foot, 40,000 foot view, the township has to allow for every legal lawful use. And if it's not in the zoning ordinance, yeah, it could be problematic. So we do have to allow for those uses.
And define an appropriate district to put it in, and define appropriate regulations to govern it.
So who decides what's appropriate? I mean, these data centers want a big footprint. We don't have that kind of footprint available, but can we say it has to be in one of these districts? And if they wanted to buy 20 lots and build a data center, that's fine. Okay.
All right, anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you to the board and thank you to the planning commission.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting then.
Is there any other public comment before the chair, before there's a motion to adjourn?
I'd just like to thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I want to make sure we express our thanks and gratitude to you and Stacy and anyone else who worked on this with your firm. It's a comprehensive rewrite, I think, and got a lot to digest and get some final comments in here, but it feels like we're 90% of the way there, so thank you.
And it's in good part to your township staff and the committee we've been working with, so we appreciate that.
Thanks to them too. All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Chris, what is the board meeting?
We need to stop the mic.
Chris,
Hold on.
what is it? I'm trying to leave on my calendar.
Yeah, because everything's all balanced.